Hey, Pat, can you hear me? We good?
Yeah, we're good. We're just adjusting the sound.
Great, thanks.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Pat, this is Kristen Myers.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, I'm just checking my sound since I'm presenting today.
Yes, you're fine. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ed or Pat, am I plugged into the meeting?
Hi, Blue. Yes, you are. Can you please mute your phone, please?
All right, but I still need you to have somebody get in touch with me so I can submit my written part. And this is what the fourth time that I wish that we could come together.
I will call you after the meeting today.
All right. So when they say it's going to be written, would you inform them that yes, there will be a written one coming in, but that, like I said, you said that you were going to have somebody get in touch with me, and that's been how many meetings that we still haven't had anybody get in touch and be able to input what I need to, such as with the actions later. But like I said, please, when they say it's going to be written, that Mr. Crowley will be having somebody with you get that information to them on all three of the inputted written items. Thanks.
Yes,
I'll put this
I will.
on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Pat, I can't see who's on the meeting, but if you could let me know when you think we have quorum, we can start forward. So just give the go ahead and we can start.
Okay. I'm doing a quick scan right now. I'm going to do a quick roll call and see where we are. It looks to be like we have enough to begin, so I will
Great.
start the roll if you're ready to go. Okay. City of Avondale. City of Buckeye.
Roger Klingler here.
City of Chandler.
Yep, John.
Sorry, City of Chandler.
Yeah, John. Hear me?
Okay. City of El Mirage. Town of Fountain Hills.
Here.
Okay. Town of Gilbert. City of Glendale.
Here.
City of Goodyear. Maricopa County.
Reed Kempton is here.
City of Mesa.
Chris Brady's here.
City of Peoria.
Eric Strunk is here.
City of Phoenix.
Mario Paniagua was here.
Town of Queen Creek.
Bruce Gardner's here.
City of Scottsdale.
Mark Melman, can I go here?
City of Surprise.
Dave Kovak here.
City of Tempe.
Hi, Pat. Stephen Methvin here.
Okay. City of Tolleson. And Ada. Mr. Chair, we're ready to go. You can call the meeting to order.
Sure thing. And just a note, I don't know if you saw Pat on the chat room. It looks like El Mirage is present, Avondale, and Julie from Goodyear will be joining us shortly.
Okay, thank you. The only place that we have not heard from is the town of Gilbert.
Great, thank you. All right, sounds like we've got it. We'll move forward. So I'd like to welcome everyone and convene the meeting of September 2nd of the joint TMC RMC today. Pat took care of the roll call. Thank you very much. Just a general reminder to everyone as we go through the meeting, you can certainly use the chat room for comments and we'll be sure to recognize that. And if you could to mute the microphone if you're not speaking or asking a question, that'll kind of keep things moving forward. And also too, I understand this is the first time we're broadcasting this on, I believe it's Facebook, correct? Or YouTube? I'm sorry? Yeah,
YouTube, sir.
Great, thank you. So there'll be others watching it as well. So with that, Pat, anything under public comment that you'd like to share?
No, I will contact Mr. Crowley this afternoon for his written public comment.
Great, thank you. Seeing that, we'll move on to item number 2, Chief Executive Officer's Report. And I'd like to call on Mr. Smith for that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to everybody to our another seem to be never-ending WebEx, Zoom type meetings. We appreciate you all. I hope we're somehow getting better at this process. Not a whole lot to talk about, but what I do have to talk about today is the very, very monumental, a couple of major milestones we reached recently in our rail program. The first, as you see on your screen, is a rendering looking from the northeast to the southwest of what will be the Northwest Phase 2 extension, which will go from about a mile and a half, 2 miles from 19th Avenue and Dunlop to Metro Center. We're excited about this. This is how the light rail will cross the I-17 and will end up in an elevated platform. The first one we built, very similar to if you've ever stayed in the economy parking at Sky Harbor and taken the SkyTrain in, a lot like that, open air. The exciting thing is that people ask often, why would you build a light rail and end it at Metro Center when Metro Center is dead as a mall? And I said, well, we probably wouldn't build it if it were a mall. This is what we actually like if Metro Center has to move on to its next chapter. We love the fact that we can be a centerpiece to what I think is going to be an incredibly exciting mixed-use development that'll be transit-centric. This not only will be a light rail station, but we'll be moving the transit center from the southwest portion of the Metro Center property into this with a 4-story elevated garage. This will just be an exciting time. The good news we got is that we received a notification from the Federal Transit Administration that this project had received a $50.6 million budget allocation, which means that there is a budget set aside. This isn't a grant agreement. We're still working on that. Won't get that for about a year, but this is exciting. The next thing milestone we had during the month, go ahead, Pat, is change slide. Okay, related to the South Central extension. We've given you some updates. This is some of the construction from the air in downtown Phoenix. That's the corner of, I believe, yes, First Avenue and Washington at the top, Jefferson at the bottom. And we are doing a lot of utility work in downtown Phoenix right now. Been adding crews. We've been resequencing activities. You can see taking advantage of the lower traffic volumes due to COVID. Next, go ahead. Some of the utility work right in front of Phoenix City Hall. We've been grateful that COVID related, our construction crews have had very minimal impact. We've been able to do that. The good news we got is the same day that the FTA told us about the Northwest 2 allocation, they also said that they had approved our letter of no prejudice. And what that means is that we are free to move forward unimpeded with construction, and all of our construction activities will be covered by federal monies till we receive a full funding grant agreement, which we hope to receive during the first quarter of next year. This is looking south. You can see we've already cleared out some of the medians, and those dirt areas have now been paved over. Those palm trees have been removed and replaced to a community lot to be reused in the South Central community. So those are two big milestones. If you don't have an LOMP, there's only so much construction work you can do. You can do very little beyond utility work. Since we have a lot of other things going, now that we've received that letter of no prejudice, we can move ahead and go full blast along the entire entire route with whatever construction activity we can accommodate, and be confident that when we do get a federal full funding agreement, that it will be covered. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Smith's and the report? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is a COVID-19 update. Mr. Smith, do you have any additional information you'd like to share on that?
We do not. Nothing's changed significantly since the last time we reported. So I'll just say things, knock on wood, are continuing to look good. We have no significant disruptions to bus service, paratransit service, rail service, or construction activities related to COVID activities. So that is that's a very good thing. We've dodged the bullet and hope to continue to do so.
Very good, thank you. Do any of the committee members have questions on COVID-19? Okay, we'll move on to the very next item, item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes from our August 5th meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read them. If I could entertain a motion and a second to approve those, that'd be wonderful.
Roger Klingler, Buckeye, moves approval.
Lee Goodyear, second.
Thanks. It's been first and seconded. Any opposed? All right, we'll move on. Thank you very much for that. We have one regular item agenda today, and that's our ERP consultants. And it's a request for a contract change order. And I'd again like to call on Mr. Smith to walk us through that and answer any questions you may have. Mr. Smith?
Chair, I'll turn it over to Paul Hodgins, who can explain what this item is. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Chair, members of the TMC RMC. We are asking for a change order for Plant Moran. They've been our consultant through this process for nearly 2 years. They helped us through our needs assessment, the RFP development, and then our vendor evaluation and selection. Initially, the fourth phase of the installation and implementation, we would envision Plant Moran doing more implementation oversight, helping us to manage and monitor risks. We'd intended to have Paula Novacek, our controller, as kind of the project director, and then hire a project manager, a full-time project manager on contract to really do the day-to-day work. So over the last few months, we've looked through dozens of project manager resumes, interviewed a few, and just really never found the person that we felt was qualified that we were looking for. In addition, in early June, Paula actually passed away from an autoimmune disorder, so we lost our project director. So kind of working with Plant Moran on helping us to fill the gaps in both those areas, we developed this concept of the project management office, where they're bringing a project director, they're bringing a full-time project manager, and then a number of subject matter experts. Our contract did allow us to renegotiate kind of this fourth phase and what Plant Moran's role would be based on the selected vendors. We think that because they've been with us now for almost 2 years, they understand the project, they understand our requirements, they understand the vendor, that this is the best solution for us to fill some of the gaps that we have in the project management area. So the change order is for just under $645,000, which would bring the total Plant Moran contract to just under $1.5 million. They will be with us. This is enough funding to last through the end of the project, which right now is estimated to be around March of 2022. With that, we're recommending that the management committee's forward to the boards of directors authority to execute the change order. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Hodgins or this item?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario Paniagua, Phoenix.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. One question I have has to do with the positions that the contractor will be replacing, the project manager and the project director. What are you intending to do with those positions?
Well, the project manager was always intended to be on a contract basis. We just hadn't originally intended to have it through Plant Moran. So it's just a shift from an independent contract project manager to having Plant Moran do that. We are recruiting to fill the controller position. Don't know yet when we'll find the right candidate to fill that, or if they'll have the same type of implementation experience that Paula had. So ultimately that will be filled, but we think that using the project director with Plant Moran is really best for the project right now.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And so I guess the other question would be, were you also intending to bring on the subject matter experts to on a separate contract as part of this, or was that an addition that was identified only for Plant Moran to do?
We were going to use mainly our own staff as subject matter experts and then hire some backfill to ensure we didn't have any gaps. So this will allow us to use subject matter experts from Plant Moran who have been through implementations before, so they have a little bit of experience there, and not rely as heavily on our staff and hopefully minimize the amount of backfill.
Okay, so was this level of funding budgeted?
Yes. Yeah, we have the funding budgeted in fiscal 21. Obviously, this carries over into fiscal 22, and that will be worked out through the budget process that we're kicking off shortly.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Are there any other questions of the committee on this item? All right, seeing none, this is an action item, so I'd like to request a motion in a second to forward to the board authorization for the CEO to execute a contract change order in the amount of $644,850. Is there a motion?
So moved. This is Kevin from Glendale.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Reed from Maricopa County.
Great, it's been moved and second that we forward this on to the board. Are there any opposed? Okay, very good. Thank you all. We will move on to a series of informational items with that. The first of those is the Broadway curve. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read the background information. There's a big construction project, improvement project planned. And I know it looks like Valley Metro has stepped up to explore ways to hopefully move traffic at no cost, no additional costs short of grants and whatnot. And I'd like Mr. Smith to kind of walk us through that. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the setup there. And a couple things I want to emphasize. First of all, this is a big project. It will have huge impact, not only on the East Valley and the Southeast Valley, but on the whole flow of traffic in the whole eastern part of the Metro Phoenix. And it will impact, obviously, auto traffic, movement of people from east to west, west to east, everything. And it's a long-term project. And as part of this, we have been meeting with ADOT staff, City of Phoenix staff, other cities, Tempe, Mesa, and other Southeast Valley staff, to discuss what this impact might be. And one of the things that came out is that ADOT talked about in their peer reviews and everything that they'll go over pretty quickly, is that transit is not only an impacted, but it's also potentially part of the solution. That led our staff to start working on just some ideas, doing some brainstorming. And I want to reemphasize what Eric talked about. This is not a proposal for a specific program. These are ideas that might maybe perhaps be implemented if at the time all the cities so involved and ADOT and MAG decided that this was something that was viable, feasible, and could be funded with additional funds. We have I want to make clear that we have no plans to move funds or to affect any other service. We don't have money to pay for this now, nor would we shift service just to handle this. But we need to go through this process of brainstorming so that everyone's aware of both the impact of the project and some potential ideas we might have to mitigate those impacts. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Myers, I believe, first of all, from MAG. Kristen, I hope you're on. Who's going to give you, good, Kristen, who's going to give us an overview of the project. And then I'm trying to remember, Marty, is Marty going to take it for us, for MAG after that, and talk about the ideas that have come up. So Kristen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of be here today to tell you a little bit about the Broadway curve. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, and as Scott mentioned, the Broadway curve is the busiest stretch of highway in Arizona and carries approximately 300,000 vehicles per day. And this is pre-COVID. Proposals are currently in review from the 3 shortlisted teams with an anticipation that construction will start this summer of 2021 and will hopefully be completed by the winter of 2024. Because this is such a busy and important corridor in the region, it is imperative that the project maintains reliability to the traveling public that uses this freeway and that we keep our system moving forward. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you some quick background on the current contract provisions that we have for the Broadway curve. As you can see at the top right now, all lanes are supposed to remain open during the weekday, especially during the weekday peak periods, and this does include the HOV lanes. I'll just quickly note that there are allowable nighttime lane closures along with some weekend lane closures. However, both directions of the I-10 cannot be closed at the same time. There are major holiday restrictions and major special event restrictions. Next slide, please. So in support of identifying potential mitigation strategies, MEG staff conducted peer research to identify freeway projects throughout the US that utilize mitigation strategies to help with construction impacts. There were 49 projects that we identified, but only 3 of those were taken forward as case studies because of their similarity to the Broadway curve. Next slide, please. Some key items to note that we found while conducting this peer research was projects that had TDM with transit focused their efforts mostly on commuter-based travel options. Construction mitigation efforts in the projects studied were most successful when implemented with lots of flexible solutions. And finally, the Broadway curve construction mitigation efforts need to be comprehensive and coordinated with everyone, and that we take into account all available mitigation tools that we have within our program. This could include the transit with TDM, signal enhancement and timing, and a robust communication plan that we're completely nimble with. I'm going to now hand the presentation back over to Marty. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate you being able to give us that introduction to the Broadway Curve project. Mr. Chair and members of the TMC RMC, I will now take us through some different aspects of the assumptions as well as ideas that Valley Metro staff have started to put together for this project. And then I'll introduce a couple other of our staff members as well who will discuss different aspects of this later on in the presentation. So to start out with the assumptions from Valley Metro as we go into this project, we do note that we will have routes that are affected, both local bus routes as well as some of our commuter transit routes. One of our main goals is that we want to be sure to provide alternative travel options because that will be a way to help alleviate project impacts and congestion. As had been mentioned before, both transit as well as transportation demand management, TDM, or in this region we call it commute solutions, these are all things that we are looking into that could potentially be included in a broad mitigation suite that is led by MAG and ADOT. And finally, as Scott had alluded to at the beginning of this presentation, any potential mitigation measures that would move forward would be implemented by MAG and ADOT, and all funding would be through the project or through new identifiable resources, i.e. some grant funding. Next slide, please. To continue on that last point, the final decisions on any project mitigation measures and funding will be made at the levels of MAG and ADOT. And essentially, Valley Metro's role here is that we're working with MAG as a partner as well as a stakeholder. And then finally, Valley Metro will not undertake any potential mitigation measures unless funding is found through new resources. So again, no resources would be taken from any local contributions to transit, and we would not at all look to divert any funding from our existing operations. Next slide, please. This is just essentially to point out everything that we identified that either intersects with the project area, which you can see is kind of that purple blob running along the I-10, as well as any routes that run parallel to it that we might expect to have some impacts due to potential cars deciding to potentially avoid the curve and instead take some of the arterial roads through that area. So as you can see, there are a fair number of routes that do intersect or run parallel to the Broadway curve construction project. A couple quick things to note on this, and I'll go into more detail on some of the impacts as well as our potential ideas for mitigation later on in the presentation. The main thing that we want to be able to do is ensure a reliable transit experience during this construction. And that has two parts when it comes to the transit side. The first is that traditional commuter base that would be using our express routes, our light rail, as well as the local routes during those times. As Kristen had mentioned, the Broadway curve project would not allow any lane closures on the highway during that point. So the only anticipated delays would just essentially be from construction-related congestion. The other thing that we wanted to look into on the Valley Metro side and that we continue to pursue is what potentially would happen to our customers that are riding our system at night and during the weekends when Broadway curve would allow different lanes configurations to be closed to allow quicker project construction. And essentially the main thing here that we want to point out is that ADOT specifically has said that they only reroute drivers on other ADOT controlled highways, but there is the potential for drivers themselves to choose to self-divert away from the corridor onto arterials. And so keeping this in mind, we want to make sure that we address both our express and rapid commuters as well as those riding the local routes in this corridor. Next slide, please. So we want to make sure that we can leverage all of the different transit and alternative travel options that Valley Metro brings to the Valley. So that includes our rail system, our commuter buses, our local services, TDM, which will be discussed later on, as well as something that is really important, but a little bit less tangible, which is messaging and marketing. We want to make sure that both the robust marketing efforts that Valley Metro already puts through can be used to leverage onto this corridor, as well as that the entire region has a coordinated marketing effort moving forward with this project. Now to move into a couple of the ideas that we've come up with as potentials to look into to ensure that this project moves forward and our transit riders are able to get where they need to go. The first thing that we looked into is we modeled actually just essentially adding congestion into the Broadway curve area, nothing else changed, to see what would happen to our rail network. And what we saw is that we actually gained about 5% in ridership based on the model. And again, this is using normal services, so pre-COVID. But we did see about a 5% jump on rail ridership just from this Broadway curve area being under construction. So the point of this slide is to show that if we do see in reality those anticipated new riders, there are spaces for them in our park and rides in the East Valley. Next slide, please. The next thing that we looked into once we found out about this potential increase in ridership, at least as the model showed, is that we could potentially look to increase our capacity of the rail system. So we came up with two options using the new system expansion vehicles, the Siemens vehicles that are getting delivered right now in anticipation of the South Central project as well as the Northwest Extension Phase 2. The first thing that we looked into was the potential to run 3-car trains with some of this new additional fleet that we have. It would be minimal cost. Really, the main cost with it is just related to cleaning as well as wear and tear on the vehicles. And if we did that over the course of a service day, we could almost add capacity for about 3,000 additional riders. The other option we looked into on this was returning to the 10-minute service during the construction period that was operating when the rail service first opened in 2008. We do want to note that this would have cost increases associated with it, but the benefit is that we could potentially add capacity for over 9,000 new riders. Next slide, please. And finally, the last thing that we looked into and modeled as well is what would happen if we tweaked a few of the intersections in the East Valley where the trains get stopped more often than anywhere else. And so we identified 5 intersections, and if these essentially would be tweaked so the train has more of a priority in terms of how the signal operations work, we saw actually that we would gain an additional 3% ridership on top of that 5% just from the project taking place. Next slide, please. Moving on to our bus network. We essentially did a similar type study with rail looking at our park and rides for the expresses in the East Valley. And as you can see here, I'm not going to talk through every one of these, but it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of our East Valley park and rides do have capacity to take on more riders. Others, it would be a bit of a stretch. And I wanted to point out a couple that we specifically discussed during our meetings with individual cities. The first is the Chandler Park and Ride down on the 202 Santan portion and Arizona Avenue. Right now, during normal times, again, pre-COVID, only about 26% of spaces on a daily basis were available in the Chandler Park and Ride. As we had this discussion with the city of Chandler, an idea came out that there's a park right across the way from that park and ride that has potential additional capacity. So it would be a relatively easy ask to essentially turn that into an overflow lot during this time period. The other route that we looked into, which was the 533 on the Superstition Springs Park and Ride, almost all the way to the east of this map, that again did not have a ton of available space. And as we discussed this with the city of Mesa, the city actually gave us a great idea that we had not looked into yet, which was instead of potentially trying to bolster service on that route, we could instead look to use our marketing team to divert customers to other routes that don't potentially intersect with the Broadway curve and that would not have as much of an impact from this project. And I will talk to that on the next slide. So next slide, please, Pat. So essentially, we modeled all of the routes that run through the East Valley to see what would potentially happen when this project comes into place. And we identified 4 routes that we are currently studying further and are doing individual models to see what tweaks could be made, as well as just how the Broadway Curve project is affecting those routes. So the 4 that we're looking into are the 531, which is the line that runs into Gilbert, the 533, the pink line that runs all the way out to Superstition Springs, the 542 running down into Chandler, and then finally the I-10 East, which goes into Ahwatukee. The other thing that we're looking into, and again, this is based on that conversation which we had with the city of Mesa, and we are very excited to look into this opportunity, is that dotted green line at the top of the map. That is Route 535. It has 2 park and rides along the Red Mountain portion of the 202. And through a marketing effort, there certainly could be the potential to get potential riders to, instead of using some of the routes that go through the Broadway curve, to instead use that instead. Next slide, please. And at this point, I will pass it over to our manager of Commute Solutions, Abby Cooksey-Williams.
Thank you. For TDM, there are a few ways that we might be able to assist in this endeavor. For employers, Commute Solutions can offer customized travel reduction program, or TRP, assistance by location. We already have transportation coordinators in place at the larger businesses and industry in the corridor. So basically, we already have boots on the ground, so to speak. We would be able to look at each company holistically and ascertain what components of TRP would best suit them. We can create specific kits and support for the transportation coordinators in the curve. Those would include digital and print marketing materials and outreach to promote the mitigation programs, such as pushing the telework message and the transit message. We would also like to establish a TMA, a Transportation Management Association, for employers in the corridor. They would feature meetings, communications, networking, and education for the employers and the transportation coordinators. It would facilitate cooperation and collaboration among employers. It would also help to inform employees by hosting town halls and other outreach opportunities. We can set up special subsites or networks for Curve employers by utilizing our new TDM ShareTheRide.com platform. For individuals, we can help employees and the general public commuters find carpools and appropriate transit routes. We can assist with forming band pools or finding existing ones, and more about that in just a moment. I mentioned earlier about the new platform that we have launched. Our vendor, Ride Amigos, has experience with a project in Denver and assures us that we can build some customized modules and functionality that will even incentivize the corridor. This means that there are contests and incentives specifically targeted and available only to those individuals who live or work in the corridor. We're extremely fortunate that the new system is in place, and again, we are already set up and ready to go. Next slide. On the subject of vanpools, our vanpool program currently has room for expansion. The fleet is ready for new starts and has ample room for growth. For targeted vanpool outreach and promotion, we can offer an incentive to include a first month lease free for all new vanpool groups who commute along the Broadway curve. And just a side note, that similar project that took place in Denver, resulted in 430 commuters joining van pools. We can also offer special corporate or TMA van pool webinars and, when the time is right, after COVID, on-site lunch and learns, tabling events, and more. And now I believe I'm handing it over to Mariah.
Yes, thank you, Abby. So from a communications and marketing standpoint, our goal is to coordinate with ADOT and MAG in their communication and outreach plans. We are here to partner with everyone to share messages by utilizing our built-in communication tools and provide strategy when and where it's needed. We also plan to amplify the value of transit by leveraging existing Valley Metro campaigns to tell the story and share the message of using alternate modes during this construction project. And finally, we plan to educate on multimodal transportation network and its value to individuals and the region. Marty, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Mariah. Next slide, please, Pat. So in closing, I just wanted to raise a few points, and then at that point, we can go into any questions that any of you may have on the committee. So again, we are investigating how to leverage this region's multimodal transportation network that we've built through Prop 300 and then through Prop 400. Our goals as Valley Metro are to contribute to the overall project success, as well as to minimize impacts to our existing transit operations. We want to ensure that our riders in this corridor are still able to get to go where they need to go. MAG and ADOT are leading this project. We are really working with them as a stakeholder. And again, all final decisions about any potential mitigation measures, as well as funding, will be made at the level of MAG and ADOT. Valley Metro will not undertake any new mitigation measures unless they are funded through new resources that are identified at the MAG and ADOT level. And again, just to reiterate, no resources would be diverted from existing transit operations. And finally, this project has been going on for a while at this point, and I am happy to say that it really is an iterative process. We had some great meetings with affected member cities in the East Valley as well as Phoenix, and we are really working to incorporate their comments as well as to run some new models and do everything we can to make sure that we are addressing all of their concerns. And as a next step, essentially this is a great segue into just asking for questions. We are really just seeking continued feedback from everyone. Thank you.
This is a great presentation. Does anyone have any questions? A lot of really good information there. Any questions of the committee?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario.
Go right ahead, Mario.
Thank you so much. Actually, no questions. I just wanted to make a comment about how appreciative I am and the City of Phoenix is for this effort on such a hugely impacting project. I appreciate the proactive and thoughtful approach being taken here, and I know MAG is also taking that same philosophy of being very proactive and thoughtful and trying to get ahead of some of these issues, learning some lessons from previous projects, learning lessons from other jurisdictions that we can bring home here to make things just a little bit easier. So just wanted to express my kudos to the team and thank everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Very nice comments. Does anyone else have any commentary?
Hi, Mr. Chair, Stephen Methvin.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, how are you, Eric?
Good. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I also want to thank Kristen and Marty and Abby and Mariah. Your presentation was excellent, and it was really easy to follow for some of us who aren't always transit experts. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate the fact that you're looking to address the impacts on our local service. In Tempe, we're struggling somewhat because we have to make some reductions in our local service because of the economy. So I appreciate the fact that there won't be an ask of the cities to fund this service. My one concern, and it's probably more of a long-term, I don't know if anybody else hears bells, and maybe it's just me, but it sounds like there's someone who's sort of shaking something. No? Okay. Might just be me. but it just stopped. So my only concern would be as we look to increase the frequency of light rail and increase the frequency of the express buses. And again, I understand that it's not going to be funded by the cities, that our ridership at one point, we don't have a plan in place on how we will keep that in those increased frequencies in effect once the project stops, that we would then, be pulling that back. And I think that always has a negative impact on our ridership when we create greater frequencies and then we pull them back, and then later we do something. And I know we've had to adjust those over time. Are we thinking yet, and that's long term, I get it, but are we thinking yet on how we will address that, as opposed to the Broadway Curve project ended and now we're pulling back those frequencies? I'm not sure who would answer that, but I'll start with you, Mr. Smith.
Oh, I had a bad connection, Stephen.
Okay.
I apologize. It did not, you came across muddled in pictures. So if somebody else could answer that rather than having me
No
repeat
worries
the
at all.
question.
Kristen or Marty, is that something that?
Certainly. Yes, I can take a stab at it for you, Stephen. Sorry about that.
No worries. I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. All right. Essentially, yes, that is certainly something that still needs to be discussed, and that is definitely a concern that we have as an agency as well, and something that we need to certainly pursue as we move with the project. A couple quick just kind of side notes from internal discussions that we've had on this. Essentially, by the time that the Broadway Curve construction would be wrapping up, would be around the time that the Prop 400 extension would come in. So likely we would be seeing a different just funding environment to begin with, hopefully in our favor. And then alternatively as well, something that had happened in all of the different projects that MAG had been studying in its peer review was that one of the best parts of what those cities had done was essentially, as the construction happened, they were constantly reviewing all of their mitigation measures to see if they were effective or not. And if they weren't effective, they would remove them and take that funding and put it towards elsewhere. So I know that on the MAG side, and Kristen, if you would like to speak to this, please do as well. I know that was something that they're really looking into as a potential way to ensure that we're doing the best possible mitigation we can. And then in terms of the after effects, certainly that is a conversation that we'll need to continue.
Thank you, Marty. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you, Mr. Methlin, for your comments and your questions. Just to tee off a little bit on what Marty just said, during our peer review, we looked at some freeway projects, one in Denver, one out in Los Angeles. The one of note in Los Angeles was that they had really anticipated that they would see a high ridership if they closed down the freeway on their system, and threw a bunch of money into that. Unfortunately, they did not see the ridership. They actually saw a decline during the weekend closure that they did have. So what they were able to do was kind of look at a different way to utilize that money. And what they found was putting it towards, they have a rail line out there, some free passes. They really worked more on the TDM side, so they had that flexibility. We also found that with other projects that went 4 to 5 years, you just never know what kind of means and methods that the constructors are going to do. And so you want to be a little bit nimble. We at MAG are still working closely with ADOT because we haven't gotten through the proposals yet. We don't quite know what the construction phasing looks like. And once we start to see that roll out, we'll actually have a better opportunity to maybe have more of those robust strategy discussions on what if and how do we anticipate some of these changes during construction. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, Marty. I have one request. So over the next few weeks, as we're starting to fine tune the proposal, I would just ask that Valley Metro and the whole team meet with our Tempe staff and perhaps other cities to better understand what some of our service cuts will look like, because I think there might be an opportunity that if we work closely together, as I know we do, we're closely together, that we might be able to find some silver lining here. So thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. Before we move on to the next item, any other comments on this one? Okay, with that, we'll move on. And before I do that, I'll just note on the chat line, Stephen, you're not the only one that apparently heard bells in the background, so you're in good company there. So with that, we'll move on to item number 7, travel expenditures and solicitations. And this is an informational item. Are there any questions on any of the items that have been sent out ahead of time? All right, I'm not hearing any. So with that, we'll move on to item number 8, future agenda items, requests, and anyone want to report anything related to transit, transportation, current events, if you will, in your area. All right, excellent. With that, we'll kind of move on to the next meeting. Just a reminder, our next joint meeting will be Wednesday, October 7th, 2020 at 11 a.m. And Pat, did you want to mention something?
Yes, we'd like to recognize Dave Colbath.
Yes.
This is his last meeting. He is retiring, I believe, at the end of next week. So congratulations to David. And thank you for your participation here at Valley Metro and improving public transit throughout the Valley. Happy retirement, Dave.
Well, thank you, and thank all of you. It's been a pleasure to serve both on the RTAG and the TMC city here. And actually, as a follow-up, I wanted to thank Valley Metro. We had Tom Young out last night with our council for a work session, and he did an excellent job giving them an update on paratransit services and right choice plans for the future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dave, and best wishes in your next endeavor. So with that, we've concluded this meeting. We're going to move right into the Transit Management Committee meeting. And I'd like to formally convene that meeting and welcome everyone to the September meeting. Pat, we'll start off with you. Do you have anything you would like to report under public comment?
No, sir, I will, like I mentioned before, I will call Mr. Crowley after this meeting is over.
You bet. Thank you. Seeing that, we'll move on to item number 2, minutes. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read through the August 5th TMC meeting minutes. And if so, I'd like to entertain a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from August 5th, 2020. Is there a motion?
Motion from Julie and Goodyear.
And is there a second?
This is Dave and Surprise. I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any opposed? All right, excellent. We'll move on to the next item. We've got a series of items on the consent agenda. And if you will, I'd like to call on Mr. Smith to discuss any of those any of our committee members may have questions on. So why don't we try it that way? Are there any questions on any of the consent agenda items today? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So what I'd like to do is entertain a motion to approve and also receive a second the consent agenda items for September 2nd. And we can read through each of them, but if not necessary, is there a motion to do that?
This is Reed. I move to approve all the consent items.
This is Mario, second.
Great, thank you very much. Any opposed? Excellent. Okay, with that, we will now move on to item number 4, which is on a regular agenda item. And this is a presentation that we will receive from Mr. Smith on a joint agency competitive solicitation for fair inspection and security services. That's a pretty lofty title there. So Mr. Smith, I'll leave it to you.
It is, and there's nothing really fancy about it. Just a sort of a reminder, because this has come up in previous meetings. The reason this is on the agenda is because this is an RFP that we would like to issue for security services that cover both rail and one facility, the Mesa facility, a bus facility for the RPTA. It's on the RPTA agenda because under our bylaws or our views, we have to come before the board before we issue an RFP above a certain amount for RPTA. That is not a requirement for Valley Metro Rail. We don't have to get board approval to issue an RFP on Valley Metro Rail. So the reason why this is on the RPTA agenda or the TMC agenda is because of the small portion, I think it's outlined in the memo, that relates to the security services at the Mesa bus facility. And so that's the reason why it's here. So this is simply to issue an RFP. This is not a proposal or anything. If you have any questions about specifics, Adrian Ruiz is ready to answer those questions. I just wanted to tell you why this is on the agenda and what it's for. Oh, Eric, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Does anyone have any questions related to this item? It's an action item. Any questions of Ms. Reese? Mr. Smith? Okay. I'm not hearing any. So with that, I'll entertain a motion and a second to forward this to the board for approval. Is there a motion and a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario from Phoenix. I move approval.
Great. Is there a second?
Bruce Gardner, King second.
Did you get that, Pat?
No, I missed the second. Bruce Gardner, was that?
Yes, Bruce Gardner and Queen Creek.
Great.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second. Any opposed? Okay, excellent. We'll move on from there. And this is also a fairly significant item too, and Mr. Smith will walk us through it. But Mr. Smith, my preliminary understanding of this is also kind of a procedural issue in the issuance of an RFP related to regional paratransit, and you're in the process of assembling that RFP, and I'll let you kind of walk us through that.
Well, thank you. Actually, it is a procedural, and we may want to look at some of this. But once again,
absolutely,
with the RFP, what our administrative and our bylaws say is that we can't begin the process of an RFP until we get board approval to start that. And so we're starting early on this. This is we have nothing. We haven't even defined scope on some of these things or defined anything. This will be a long process. I'll turn it over to Jim Hilliard, who can give some more detail, because there was some misunderstanding at the RTAG that maybe we are in the middle of the process or that we had moved ahead without staff. No, this is literally, we're at the starting line and just getting approval to start the race. And this will be sort of a marathon. So Jim, if you want to discuss this briefly and give some more details to why we're starting at this time and what's involved.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Members, as Scott mentioned, we're seeking permission to begin the development of the RFP and its scope of work 11 months prior to the date at which we would anticipate issuing it, precisely so that we can engage city staff at the level they'd like to be involved in developing this solicitation. In fact, we have our first meeting along those lines next Tuesday, where we have invited both the paratransit partners and the RTAG members to a joint meeting with our chief of procurement to talk through and hopefully arrive at consensus on the process by which we'll engage cities in the development of this RFP. We anticipate at this point there being sort of 3 major levels of engagement. We'd like to have work sessions with as many cities as possible to talk through the broad structure of the RFP. So for example, one of the motivating factors in resoliciting this contract rather than exercising a current contractual option to extend the current contract is we've been seeing great success with the Ride Choice program. Ride Choice and Paratransit both operate essentially independently right now. They have their own customer service call centers. They have their own scheduling functions. And when a customer calls Paratransit, they get paratransit services, even if Ride Choice could serve them in a more cost-effective fashion. And so one of the things I think we've agreed at the RTAG and ATS partners level is that we should merge those functions. We should eliminate the duplication in customer service, and we should have, I'll say, sort of service-neutral scheduling that would allow the customer service function to identify which of those 2 services can best meet the needs of a particular customer in the most cost-effective way, and to make that suggestion. So the structure of our contracts right now don't allow that to happen. There may be other places that we can bring these services together to increase efficiency and customer service, and we want to be able to have those conversations in a group setting with the cities at a relatively high level, and then we'll take that feedback and have a smaller team that's a mix of Valley Metro and city staff develop a specific scope of work, and then we'll have proposals evaluated by evaluation committee members, which will include both Valley Metro and city staff. So we'll have those 3 different levels of engagement that cities can participate in, from a higher, more conceptual level down to the actual words of the scope of work, and then finally the evaluation of the proposals. So we're baking in a lot of extra time to ensure the maximum possible participation across the board in the development of this scope of work, as we recognize the importance that it has to the region. And so with that, if there's any specific questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you for that. Are there any questions of the committee related to this item?
Eric, this is Chris. Can I ask a few questions?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's important. I think there is some concern overall that we've got to figure out how to kind of merge the, you spoke directly to it, but we've got to figure out from the customer's perspective, this kind of a one-stop opportunity, right, to engage in, transit, Ride Choice. So I think that's a paramount objective, and I appreciate you articulating that. But it does look like, because they've been separate, right, for some time, how to bring those together. I think that is such an important part of the customer experience, and I appreciate what you described as the outreach. I think what I would say is, can we really, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to understand from your perspective is, do you believe that at the end of the day, you're going to actually have a specific plan, or is that just going to be an objective goal of the RFP? I'm trying to understand where you're getting to on that and how that's to be executed. Because I would just say, I think this is such an important part for our customers in Mesa, and I'm sure for the rest of the region. I guess we would really like to see the outcome of these discussions in a plan, maybe simultaneous or right before we're actually doing the RFP, just to make sure we're going to be able to execute this objective. So share with me kind of what you think your timing is and how that relates to the timing of the release of the RFP.
Certainly, thanks for that question, Mr. Brady. So to your first point, yeah, I think there's consensus already that the scope of work needs to be developed to create a single scheduling and customer service function for both paratransit and Ride Choice. I think there's no disagreement about that. We also had that opportunity validated by some independent benchmarking that we had Accenture conduct for us. And so that, I think, is unquestioned. There are still some structural questions that I think we as a region have to work through, and that's why these work groups will be so important. So for example, one of the challenges that we have right now is Ride Choice having enough wheelchair accessible vehicles for customers. Well, one way one could solve for that problem is to not only merge the scheduling and customer service function, but to have a single entity providing paratransit and ride choice, so that ride choice customers could use paratransit vehicles when they're not otherwise engaged in paratransit services. The flip side of that is conversely, there could be real advantage in continuing to have two different entities operate ride choice versus paratransit, because you're now creating some quality and some price competition between those operators for our business during the course of the contract. And so there's key structural decisions like that, one operator or two, that have pros and cons that we think we need to talk through with all cities, hopefully arrive at consensus on, and then incorporate that into the scope of work that will ultimately be issued. And those kinds of decisions, I think, have not been made. We really need to sort of think them through as a region and arrive at what we think will make the most sense from both a cost effectiveness and a customer service perspective.
That's wonderful, and I appreciate your diligence in that. I think, to your point, this is such a critical conversation, and kind of making this evaluation about whether this can be done or not. I guess to me, it would be very helpful after you've gone through this process. Is a timing work that you could bring that back to this group just to kind of report out the conclusion, or the kind of after your due diligence, kind of what is the strategy before we go to the next step? I think because you're touching all the right points, I'm just really anxious to hear what the conclusion is before we go too far. Does that make sense?
It certainly does, and I'm sure that we could bring back to TMC, RMC, sort of what emerges from these workshops with the cities in terms of that broader structure. If we were to if TMC, RMC want to look at the specific language of the scope of work, we'd need to work with our procurement office and potentially do that in the context of an executive session or some other venue that would protect the confidentiality of the scope of work prior to issue, because of course, that maintains the integrity of the procurement. But I'm sure in either case, we could work with TMC and work with our procurement office to come up with a way to share those key points and ensure that there's consensus across the cities.
Yeah, all I'm asking for is maybe return back here and just report out how the RFP is going to try to accomplish these objectives. And you come to a conclusion that it can be done, or is it a different idea? That's all I'm asking for. I think we just need to have the assurance that we think we want to head in this direction, and how we're going to try to accomplish that through the solicitation process.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent comments. Are there any other suggestions or comments in general on this particular item?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I just would echo what Mr. Brady just shared. I thought that that was excellent feedback, and I know Gilbert would appreciate the same.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm going to take off my chair hat real quickly and speak from Peoria's perspective. We would appreciate that too. There's a lot of local nuance with paratransit. Some of us have separate systems in place. This is regional, and that conversation, that touch-in with the group, I think would be well-founded. Okay. Are there any other comments? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mario here.
Yes, go right ahead.
Just wanted to make a comment, really to make folks aware that Phoenix is going to be issuing a solicitation for our own paratransit service new contract at approximately the same time. So we're looking at about a year from now issuing an RFP and then starting a new contract July 1st of 2022. And we've done some investigating to see whether that would into the industry to see whether that would cause any issues. We don't believe it will at all. And we've had discussions with Valley Metro staff about that as well. But I just wanted to make sure that that this committee was aware that we were doing that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments? Good discussion, good points. Okay, this is an action item. So in order to forward this on, the development of the RP, giving the CEO authorization to do that to the board, I need a motion and a first and a second to move this along. Are there anyone make a motion?
This is Chris again. So I would make the motion to approve this item, move forward with an RFP with the stipulation that I think has been agreed to, that before we go all the way out the door with the RFP, we come back and have this discussion about this kind of, Jim, how do you want to refer to this? As a, what's the best reference to this experience for the customer? One stop shop? What do you refer to it as internally? I don't speak your language, so what would you refer to it as?
That's a great question. I don't think it's something we've settled on a nomenclature for.
We'll just call, I do, Jim, we'll just call it the Chris Brady stipulation.
There you go.
Well, everybody will know what it means.
Right. My motion is to move forward the authorization RFP, but stipulating that before it actually goes out on the street, that we had come back and have a discussion about how we can improve the customer service with one-stop experience for our customers coordinating. So I don't know if that's helpful. That's best.
Sure.
We understand.
Any comments on that? I think we get where we're going. We'll amend the motion, I guess, as appropriate. We'll note that, and that will be the context of it, and we'll bring this back before it's formally issued. Okay.
We need a second, Chair.
We still need a second? Okay.
I'll second. Mary Goodman.
Excellent. Okay, I have a first and a second to move this forward to the board with the understanding that it will be revisited with this group prior to any issuance, focusing in on the customer service aspects is articulated by Mr. Brady. Are there any opposed? Okay, that's what we're going to do on this item. So sounds good. We will move on to the remainder of the agenda. And it looks like we have the item number 6 is future agenda items requests and report on current events. Does anyone want to share or have a request and ask that we can consider for an upcoming meeting? All right, I'm not hearing any. And with that, I'll just note the next meeting is on October 7th, 2020 at 11 a.m. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting today and hand it over to the Rail Management Committee. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you in October. Take care.
All right, just waiting for the Pong game to end here. All right, Pat, does it look like we're still good? We didn't lose more than we needed to, did we?
Nope, we are good to go, sir.
Go. Okay. All right. So we will now convene the meeting of the Rail Management Committee Rail Management Committee for September 2nd. First item is public comment. Pat, any public comment or written statements from anybody?
No, sir, I will contact Mr. Crowley at the close of this meeting.
All right, thank you. The next item is approval of the minutes from the August 5th, 2020 RMC meeting are presented for approval by the board. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of August 5th?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario. I move approval of the minutes.
Approval by a motion approved by Mario. Do you have a second?
This is Stephen. I'll second that.
Thank you, Stephen. Second from Stephen. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. We have the items for consent or approval. Is there any item that needs to be removed from the consent agenda? All right, if not, we'll seek and request a motion for the consent agenda. We have one of those.
Chair, this is Mario. I move approval of the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Mario. Mario makes the motion. Do we have a second? Come on.
This is Stephen. I'll do it. I'll second that motion.
Thanks, Steve. All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now we're at item 4, the Northwest Phase 2 Light Rail Extension, updated funding, design, and construction agreement with City of Phoenix. Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I believe I'm on. Yeah, just very quickly, this is basically a cash flow action. The federal funds in transit are all refundable or reimbursement funds. And so we have to spend the money up front, and then when the grant comes through, the federal money will then go to refund that. City of Phoenix has agreed to advance funds necessary to cover that the cash flow until the federal grants are received. This is not an increase in the budget. Doesn't change total budget amounts or projected spend. It's merely making sure that we have cash flow available from the City of Phoenix, awaiting the full funding grant agreement reimbursements.
Very good. Thank you. That makes sense. All right. So are there any questions for Mr. Smith on this item?
Mr. Chair, this is Mario.
Mario, are you good for the money?
Well, we as of today, we'll just say that.
Go ahead.
So appreciate it, Mr. Chair. We really appreciate all the work the Valley Metro has done on this project and are very excited to be moving forward. I realize this is just a perfunctory item regarding the cash flow, but symbolically, we are excited about how the project is moving ahead and the strong support we're getting at the federal level from the FTA. So if I may, I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Very appropriate. Thank you, Mario. We have a second?
I'll second that, Stephen.
Very good. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. Congratulations, Mario. It's a great project. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right. We're at item number 5, future agenda items. Requests. Any requests for any future agenda items?
No.
All right. If not, just for information, the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, October 7th, 2020 at 11 a.m. Thank you all very much. Pat, are we adjourned?
Yes, sir. If you say so, we are done.
Following your lead, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all. Thanks, Pat. You do an awesome job.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.